I sit in the dim light of a motel room, and everything feels both too still and too loud. The lampshade casts uneven shadows across cracked wallpaper, the kind of place where people come to disappear for a few hours. My shirt hangs open, buttons undone somewhere between desperation and tenderness, and my hands won't stop moving. They trace the edge of the scratched nightstand, smooth the wrinkled sheets, touch my collarbone where I can still feel the ghost of his breath. On the nightstand, my wedding band catches the yellow light. I placed it there carefully, almost ceremoniously, like laying flowers on a grave. The gold looks foreign now, this symbol of a life that feels increasingly like someone else's story. 22 years I've worn that ring, and tonight it sits 3 feet away from me, abandoned. Behind me, he sleeps. His name is Desmond, and he's turned toward the wall, one arm tucked beneath the pillow, breathing steady and unguarded in a way that makes my chest tighten. I watch the rise and fall of his shoulders, the way his dark hair curls against his neck, and I'm caught between awe and a kind of dread that sits heavy in my stomach. Minutes ago, maybe an hour, his arm was draped across my ribs, his face pressed into the curve of my neck like it belonged there. Like this was natural. Like this was home. I remember the weight of him, warm and solid, and how I lay perfectly still, afraid that moving might break whatever spell had settled over us. Afraid that breathing too deeply might wake him and force us back into the world where this couldn't exist. But then his words come back to me, whispered days earlier in the fluorescent glare of our office building. "Don't catch feelings," he had said, his voice light, but his eyes serious. "Keep this simple. A rule. A plea. A shield against the very thing I can feel taking root in my chest, like something dangerous and beautiful." I failed before we even began. The air conditioning rattles in the corner, filling the silence with its mechanical breathing. Outside, a car door slams. Voices carry across the parking lot, someone else's midnight drama playing out in the distance. This place exists in the margins, where people come to be someone other than who they are in daylight. But sitting here in the aftermath, pulling the thin motel sheets around my shoulders, I realize I'm not pretending to be someone else. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I feel like myself. And that terrifies me more than anything. I stare into the slice of night visible through the gap in the curtains, knowing that everything has already changed. Knowing that I've crossed a line I didn't even realize I was approaching. The ring on the nightstand glints like an accusation, like a question I'm not ready to answer. In the morning, I'll have to drive home. I'll have to sit across from Evelyn at breakfast, help Clara with her college applications, pretend that this version of myself doesn't exist. But right now, in this borrowed room with its borrowed time, I can admit the truth that's been building inside me like pressure in a sealed container. I am already lost. The sheets smell like industrial detergent and something faintly sweet, maybe the remnants of someone else's perfume. I pull them tighter around myself, but they can't keep out the weight of what I've done. What we've done. The room holds our secret like a confessional, and I am both penitent and unrepentant. Desmond shifts in his sleep, a small sound escaping his lips, and I freeze. I want to reach out, to trace the line of his spine, to wake him with my touch and lose myself again in the heat of his skin. But I also want to memorize this moment exactly as it is. Him sleeping, unguarded and beautiful. Me watching, finally understanding what it means to want something so completely that it rewrites the story of who you thought you were. The digital clock on the nightstand blinks red numbers into the darkness. 3:17 in the morning. In a few hours, the sun will rise, and we'll have to become different people again. He'll button his shirt and smooth his hair and become the colleague who challenges me in meetings. I'll slip my ring back on and become the husband who mows the lawn on Saturdays. But right now, in this suspended moment between one life and another, I allow myself to feel the truth of it. The way my heart pounds when he looks at me. The way his laugh makes me forget everything else. The way his fingers felt interlaced with mine, like they'd been designed to fit together. I am 46 years old, and I am falling in love for the first time. The realization sits in my chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. This is what I was afraid of. This is what he warned me against. And this is what I can no longer deny or contain or wish away. Outside, the world continues its endless turning. But inside this room, time has stopped, and I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, even if I have no idea what comes next. That morning, I drive home through the quiet suburbs outside Boston, past the maple trees that line Crescent Drive like sentinels. The houses sit back from the sidewalks with their perfect lawns and careful landscaping, each one a small fortress of respectability. Mine is the third from the corner, a colonial with white shutters and a front porch where Evelyn hangs seasonal wreaths. To anyone passing by, it looks like the kind of home where happiness lives. I pull into the driveway and sit for a moment before turning off the engine. The kitchen window glows warm yellow, and I can see Evelyn moving inside, probably making her morning coffee with the careful ritual she's perfected over 20 years. She measures the grounds exactly, sets the timer, arranges her mug just so. Everything in its place, everything predictable. Inside, the house smells like vanilla candles and the faint trace of Clara's perfume lingering in the hallway. The walls are lined with photographs in matching frames, a carefully curated gallery of our life together. Here we are at Clara's 8th grade graduation. There's our vacation to Cape Cod 3 summers ago, all of us squinting into the sun. Evelyn chose each picture, arranged them with an eye for composition that makes our family look magazine perfect. But standing in my own hallway, I feel like I'm looking at someone else's life. Evelyn appears in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for her job at the nonprofit where she coordinates fundraising events. Her blonde hair is pulled back in the style she's worn for years, neat and professional. She smiles at me, the kind of smile that's become automatic after 2 decades of marriage. "Good morning," she says. "You're up early." I tell her I couldn't sleep, that I went for a drive. The lie sits easily on my tongue, worn smooth by repetition. She nods and returns to her coffee, and I realize this is how we've learned to live together, in parallel lines that never quite touch. Clara thunders down the stairs, 17 years old and perpetually late for something. She grabs a granola bar from the counter and barely looks at either of us. Her dark hair falls across her face like a curtain, hiding whatever thoughts occupy the landscape of teenage consciousness. There was a time when she would curl up next to me on the couch, when she would tell me about her day at school, her friends, her dreams. Now she exists in a world I can't access, wrapped in the intensity of becoming whoever she's meant to be. "Drive me to school," she says, more command than question. Mom's car is in the shop. In the car, she plugs in her headphones and stares out the window. I watch her profile at red lights. This girl who was once small enough to carry on my shoulders, and I feel the distance between us like a physical ache. Not just the natural separation that comes with growing up, but something deeper. As if she can sense the fault lines in our family, the places where the foundation has started to shift. At work, I sit in my corner office with its view of the parking lot and review financial portfolios for clients who trust me to secure their futures. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm good at it. I understand risk assessment, long-term planning, the careful balance between security and growth. But I can't seem to apply any of that wisdom to my own life. My secretary brings me coffee and sorts through my messages. The morning passes in a blur of phone calls and spreadsheets, the familiar rhythm of professional competence. To my colleagues, I am Julian Morrison, reliable and steady. The man who never misses deadlines, who stays late when projects run over, who brings donuts to the break room on Fridays. But in the bathroom mirror at lunch, I practice expressions I can never show. I let my face relax into something softer, more vulnerable. I imagine what it would look like to want something openly, without apology. The fluorescent lights are unforgiving, but for a moment, I can see past the mask I've been wearing for so long. That evening, I grilled chicken on the back deck while Evelyn tends to her flower beds. This is our summer routine, as choreographed as a dance we've performed countless times. She updates me on Clara's college visits, the schedule she's researched and printed out in neat folders. I nod and ask the appropriate questions, but the words feel like they're coming from very far away. After dinner, I sit in my study and pretend to read quarterly reports while Clara does homework at the kitchen table and Evelyn watches a cooking show. The house is full of the comfortable sounds of domestic life, but I feel like I'm observing it from behind glass. Like a ghost walking through his own routines, present but not really there. This is the life I built. These are the people I chose to love. This house, this job, this careful arrangement of responsibilities and expectations. I wear it all like an ill-fitting suit, stitched together from years of quiet compromise and the accumulated weight of doing what was expected rather than what was wanted. But now I know what it feels like to want something so completely that it reorders everything else. And sitting in my study, surrounded by the evidence of a well-ordered life, I understand that I can't unknow it. Can't unfeel the way Desmond's hand felt in mine. Can't forget the sound of his breathing in the dark. The house settles around me with its familiar creaks and sighs, but for the first time in years, I am wide awake. The catalyst arrives on a Tuesday morning in October, walking into the conference room with the kind of confidence that fills a space before he even speaks. Desmond Sean, the new hire from the Seattle office, fresh out of his transfer and carrying himself like he has nothing to prove to anyone. He's younger than me by at least 8 years, maybe 9. With dark hair that never quite looks professionally styled and a way of moving that suggests he's never learned to apologize for taking up space. I notice him first in the break room, rolling up his sleeves while waiting for coffee to brew. There's something deliberate about the gesture, practiced but not performative. His forearms are lean, scattered with freckles, and I find myself watching longer than I should. When he catches me looking, he nods with a half-smile that suggests he's used to being noticed but doesn't particularly care one way or the other. In meetings, he leans back in his chair with a casualness that would have been unthinkable when I started here. He challenges ideas that the rest of us have learned to let pass unchallenged, asks questions that cut straight through the corporate speak to the heart of what we're actually trying to accomplish. His laugh, when it comes, is sharp and genuine, the kind that cracks open rooms and makes everyone else feel like they've been holding their breath. He unsettles me in ways I don't immediately understand. 3 weeks into November, our department head pairs us together on the Kellerman account, a sprawling portfolio restructure that's already behind schedule and bleeding money. The client is demanding, the timeline is impossible, and everyone else has found reasons to avoid it. But sitting across from Desmond in the small conference room we've claimed as our workspace, I realize I don't mind the challenge. He works differently than anyone I've collaborated with before. Where I approach problems methodically, building careful frameworks, and following established protocols, he improvises. He'll stare at a spreadsheet for 10 minutes, then suddenly grab a marker and start sketching diagrams on the whiteboard, connections I hadn't seen forming under his hands like some kind of financial alchemy. Our first late night happens almost by accident. It's Thursday, the office has emptied out, and we're still hunched over projected earnings reports when the cleaning crew arrives. We order Thai food and eat it out of paper containers while the numbers swim before our tired eyes, and somewhere between the pad Thai and the third pot of coffee, the conversation shifts. He tells me about growing up in Portland, about his parents who expected him to become a doctor and couldn't understand why he chose finance instead, about the ex-boyfriend who left him for someone less complicated, someone who didn't question everything and laugh at inappropriate moments. The words come easily, without the careful editing I've learned to apply to every personal revelation. I find myself talking too, more than I have in years. About Clara, about how I feel like I'm watching her grow up from behind a window. About the way marriage can become a kind of elaborate performance, two people playing their assigned roles so well they forget who they were before the curtain went up. You ever think about what it would be like, he says, leaning back in his chair and studying me with those dark eyes that never seem to look away first, to just live honestly. No performance, no careful arrangement of acceptable parts. The question hangs in the air between us like something fragile and dangerous. I want to tell him that I think about it constantly, that I stand in bathroom mirrors practicing expressions I can never show, that I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my own life for 20 years. But instead I just nod, and he seems to understand everything I can't say. These late nights become a rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, stretching into the weekend when deadlines demand it. We develop our own language of glances and half-finished sentences, inside jokes that make no sense to anyone else. I start looking forward to 6 o'clock, when the office empties and we can stop pretending to be just colleagues working on a project. One night in December, with snow falling outside and the building humming with the white noise of after-hours silence, the conversation turns to music. He plays something from his phone, some indie band I've never heard of, and I'm surprised by how much I like it. Raw and honest in a way that makes me think of things I've been afraid to want. That's when he tells me about the apartment he's renting in Cambridge, about the books stacked in uneven piles and the paintings he bought at a gallery opening because they reminded him of rain, about how he's never learned to live any way except exactly as he is, unapologetic and unedited. And I realize that everything I've built, every careful structure I've used to organize my life, feels suddenly fragile in comparison. We're packing up to leave, the project finally nearing completion after weeks of collaboration that felt more like discovery. In the elevator, neither of us speaks, but the silence thrums with something I don't have words for yet. Outside, the December air is sharp enough to catch in our lungs, and our breath forms clouds that dissipate quickly in the darkness. He pauses by my car, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, and for a moment I think he's going to say goodnight and walk away. Instead, he steps closer, close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, and when he speaks, his voice is lower than usual, careful in a way that suggests the words have weight. "Don't catch feelings, man," he says, but there's something in his tone that sounds like a question disguised as a warning. "Keep this simple." The words hit me like both an invitation and a shield, like he's offering me something precious and dangerous while simultaneously protecting us both from it. I want to ask him what he means, want to push past the careful distance he's trying to maintain, but instead I just nod and watch him walk away across the parking lot. Driving home through the empty streets, I understand that something fundamental has shifted, that the walls of my carefully constructed life have started to bend, and I'm no longer sure I want to keep them standing. What begins as companionship becomes something that smolders in the spaces between words, in glances that last a heartbeat too long, in the way our hands brush when he passes me coffee. The Kellerman project wraps up just before New Year's, but somehow we find reasons to stay late anyway. There's always another client to discuss, another report to review, another excuse to remain in those after-hours moments when the building belongs to us alone. January arrives with a cold snap that turns the city brittle and bright. We develop new rituals. Coffee at the place down the street that stays open past 9. Cigarettes shared on the loading dock behind the building, even though neither of us really smokes. These conversations that start about work and drift toward territories I've never learned to navigate with anyone else. He tells me about the first man he ever kissed, a college roommate who pretended it never happened the next morning. About his mother calling to ask when he's going to find a nice girl and settle down, and how he stopped correcting her assumptions because the silence is easier than the disappointment. About the way loneliness can become a kind of companion, familiar and reliable in its constancy. I find myself sharing things I've never spoken aloud. About the night Clara was born, how I held her in the hospital room and felt like I was looking at a stranger who was somehow completely mine. About the early years of my marriage, when Evelyn and I would stay up until dawn talking about everything and nothing, when conversation felt like discovery rather than obligation. About the slow, quiet way dreams can die, not in dramatic collapse, but in the gradual accumulation of small compromises. One evening in late January, something shifts. We're walking to our cars through the empty parking lot, our breath visible in the frigid air, when Desmond stops suddenly and doubles over laughing. I ask him what's funny, and he shakes his head, unable to catch his breath. He finally manages, still grinning. "The way you said revenue optimization in that meeting today, like it was the dirtiest thing you'd ever heard. Like saying it out loud might get you arrested." And then I'm laughing too, really laughing in a way that surprises us both. The sound echoes off the empty office buildings around us, and I realize I can't remember the last time I laughed like this. Not polite chuckling at dinner parties or obligatory amusement at office humor, but this free, unguarded sound that seems to come from somewhere deep in my chest. Desmond studies me while I catch my breath, and there's something in his expression I haven't seen before. Not judgment, but recognition. Like he's seeing through all the careful layers I've built around myself to something I'd forgotten was there. "There he is," he says quietly, and the words hit me with unexpected force. That night, driving home through streets glazed with ice, I catch my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognize myself. My face looks different, younger somehow, like laughing has rearranged something fundamental in my features. The conversations stretch deeper. On a Thursday night in February, we end up in his car in the parking garage, talking about what it means to live authentically. The heater runs sporadically and our words hang visible in the cold air, but neither of us suggests leaving. "I've been thinking about what you said," I tell him, "about living honestly." He turns to face me in the dim light filtering down from the concrete levels above us. "The question is whether you're brave enough to do anything about it." The words sit between us like a challenge, and I realize I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of the careful distance I've maintained from my own desires. Tired of watching my life from behind glass. Our first kiss happens the following week, on a Tuesday night when the snow is falling so hard that the city has gone quiet around us. We're standing outside the coffee shop, neither willing to say goodnight, when he steps closer, and everything I've been holding back suddenly feels impossible to contain. It's hesitant at first, clumsy in the way of people who are crossing a line they can never uncross. But then his hand finds the back of my neck, and I'm pulling him closer, and the kiss deepens into something desperate and necessary. When we break apart, both of us are breathing hard, and I can see in his eyes the same mixture of want and terror that's coursing through me. We don't talk about what it means. Instead, we drive to the motel on Route 9, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask questions. The key is heavy in my palm as we stand outside the door, and for a moment I think one of us will come to our senses and walk away. But then Desmond's hand covers mine on the doorknob, and we step inside together. What happens in that room transforms everything I thought I knew about desire, about tenderness, about the difference between making love and simply having sex. His hands on my skin feel like discovery, like coming home to a place I didn't know I'd been searching for. When he whispers my name against my neck, it sounds like a prayer and a confession all at once. But it's the aftermath that undoes me completely. The way he falls asleep with his face pressed against my collarbone, trusting and unguarded. The way his breathing slows and deepens while I lie awake, memorizing the weight of him, the warmth of his skin, the impossible fact that he's chosen to be here with me. I should feel guilty. I should be thinking about Evelyn sleeping alone in our bed 20 minutes away, about Clara, and the way this secret will change everything if she ever discovers it. Instead, I feel more present in my own life than I have in years. This becomes our rhythm. Tuesday and Thursday nights, sometimes Saturdays when I can invent convincing excuses. Each time, I tell myself it will be the last time, that we'll find our way back to the safer ground of friendship and professional collaboration. But then I'll see him in a meeting, catch him watching me with that slight smile, and I know I'm lying to myself about my capacity for restraint. One night in March, lying in the tangled sheets with the spring rain drumming against the motel windows, he traces patterns on my chest with his fingertip and asks me what I'm thinking about. "You," I admit before I can stop myself. "This. How I don't want to leave." He goes still beside me, and I realize I've violated the unspoken rules we've established. This is supposed to be simple, contained, separate from the lives we lead in daylight. But the truth is already out there, hanging in the air between us like something fragile and dangerous. "Julian," he says, and my name in his voice sounds like both a warning and a benediction. I know, I tell him. I know what you said about not catching feelings, but I think it's too late for that. He doesn't answer right away, but when he finally looks at me, his eyes hold the same mixture of want and fear that I recognize in my own reflection. And I understand that despite all his warnings, Despite his attempts to keep this simple and contained, he's fallen just as far as I have. We don't talk about what comes next. Instead, he kisses me again, slow and thorough, like he's trying to memorize the taste of my mouth. And I let myself sink into the moment, into the impossible tenderness of it, knowing that everything I thought I knew about my life is shifting beneath me like sand. The revelation doesn't arrive in fire or fury, but in the quiet mundanity of a Wednesday morning in early April. I'm standing in my kitchen at dawn, watching Evelyn stir cream into her coffee with the same measured motions she's used for 20 years. The silence between us stretches like an ocean, filled with everything we've stopped saying to each other. She's wearing the blue robe I bought her 3 Christmases ago, her hair still mussed from sleep, and she moves through our morning routine with the precision of someone who has perfected the choreography of avoiding meaningful contact. The coffee maker gurgles. The refrigerator hums. Outside, a neighbor starts his car and backs out of his driveway, beginning another day in the endless cycle of suburban responsibility. For the first time, I see our marriage not as the safe harbor I've always believed it to be, but as a cage built from silence and obligation, from 20 years of parallel lives that touch only at the prescribed moments. Breakfast, dinner, Clara's parent-teacher conferences. The mechanical intimacy of people who have forgotten how to see each other clearly. I love Evelyn the way one loves a family photograph, with nostalgia and gratitude and a kind of gentle grief for what once was. But not with life. Not with the electric recognition I feel when Desmond's eyes meet mine across a conference room. Not with the breathless urgency that keeps me awake at night thinking about the curve of his neck. Evelyn glances up and catches me staring. "Everything all right?" she asks, and the question is so automatic, so devoid of real curiosity, that I almost laugh. "Fine," I tell her. "Just tired." She nods and returns to her coffee, accepting my lie because it's easier than whatever truth might be hiding beneath it. This is how we've learned to love each other, through careful evasions and the comfortable distance of people who have agreed to stop asking difficult questions. Clara appears in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, already moving toward whatever constellation of teenage concerns will occupy her day. She barely acknowledges either of us, grabbing an apple from the counter and heading for the front door. The house settles back into its familiar quiet, and I realize I'm holding my breath. That evening, in the dim sanctuary of the motel room that has become our refuge, I lie in Desmond's arms and try to find words for the understanding that's been building inside me like pressure in a sealed container. His fingers trace absent patterns on my chest, and the tenderness of the gesture nearly undoes me. "I don't want this to be just a mistake," I say into the darkness, the words escaping before I can stop them. The room goes still. Even the air conditioning seems to pause its mechanical breathing. Desmond's hand stops moving, and I can feel him processing what I've just admitted, the weight of it settling between us like something fragile and dangerous. "Julian," he says finally, and there's something in his voice I've never heard before. Not surprise, exactly, but a kind of careful recognition, as if he's been waiting for me to say what we've both been feeling. He shifts to face me in the dim light filtering through the curtains, and when he reaches up to trace the line of my jaw, his touch is so gentle it makes my chest tight. He doesn't say anything else, but his silence is an answer. We've both fallen far beyond the boundaries he tried to establish, beyond the safe distance of physical desire into something deeper and more terrifying. "You're scared," he observes, not a question but a statement of fact delivered without judgment. Terrified, I admit. Of what this means, of what I want it to mean. Of the fact that I'm living 2 lives, and the fracture between them is widening every day. He kisses me then, slow and thorough, like he's trying to pour everything he can't say into the connection between us. When we break apart, his forehead rests against mine, and I can feel his breath warm against my lips. "What do you want, Julian? Really want, not what you think you should want." The question hangs in the air like a challenge, and I realize I've been so focused on what I'm supposed to want, supposed to be, that I've forgotten how to listen to my own desires. But lying here in his arms, with his dark eyes holding mine steadily. The answer comes without hesitation. This, I tell him. You. The way you make me feel like I'm finally awake after decades of sleepwalking. He doesn't promise me anything, doesn't offer easy solutions or romantic declarations. Instead, he pulls me closer and lets me rest my head against his chest, where I can hear his heartbeat steady and sure beneath my ear. Later, driving home through the empty streets, I catch my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognize the man looking back at me. Not because he looks like a stranger, but because for the first time in years, maybe decades, he looks like someone who wants to be free. At home, Evelyn is already asleep, curled on her side of the bed with her back to my empty pillow. I stand in the doorway and watch her breathe, this woman I've shared a life with, and I feel the weight of what's shifting inside me. Not anger or resentment, but a kind of profound sadness for the ways we've both learned to settle for safety instead of truth. In the bathroom, I brush my teeth and avoid my own eyes in the mirror, not because I'm ashamed of what I see there, but because I'm not ready for the conversation it would require. The house creaks around me with its familiar nighttime sounds, but I feel like I'm listening to it from a great distance. I slip into bed carefully, trying not to wake Evelyn, and lie staring at the ceiling while she sleeps beside me. The space between us feels vast, filled with all the words we've stopped saying, all the dreams we've quietly abandoned. For the first time, I let myself imagine what it would look like to stop pretending, to choose desire over duty, truth over convenience, the difficult beauty of authenticity over the comfortable cage of expectation. The thought should terrify me more than it does. Instead, lying in the darkness with Desmond's touch still warm on my skin, I feel something I haven't experienced in decades. I feel awake. The choice arrives not in dramatic confrontation, but in the careful mundanity of a Thursday dinner in late April. Evelyn has made her famous lasagna, the one she reserves for occasions when she wants everything to feel normal and controlled. Clara sits across from me, picking at her food while scrolling through something on her phone, and the dining room feels both familiar and strange, like a stage set for a play I no longer remember how to perform. Evelyn begins talking about Clara's college visits, her voice carrying that particular tone she uses when discussing the future. She's researched everything with her usual thoroughness, printed out schedules and campus maps, arranged the trips with the precision of a military campaign. Her enthusiasm fills the space between us, and I realize she's including me in her vision of shared futures, assuming I'll be there for every step of this carefully orchestrated next chapter. Boston University next weekend, she says, cutting her lasagna into precise squares. Then Tufts the weekend after. Clara's excited about the journalism program, aren't you, honey? Clara nods without looking up from her phone, and Evelyn continues planning our family's trajectory with the confidence of someone who has never questioned whether the foundation beneath her might be shifting. She talks about parent orientation sessions and dormitory tours, about how we'll need to coordinate our schedules for move-in day in the fall. With each word, I feel the walls of my life closing in. Not just the walls of this house, but the walls of expectation and obligation that have defined every choice I've made for the past 20 years. The careful architecture of respectability that I've built around us, room by room, year by year, until I can barely breathe inside it. I watch Evelyn's face as she speaks, animated in a way she rarely is anymore, and I see the woman I fell in love with in college. The one who believed in plans and possibilities, who thought love was enough to build a life on. She deserves better than this performance I've been giving her, better than a husband who feels like a stranger in his own skin. That night, after Clara has disappeared upstairs and the dishes are washed and put away, I find myself sitting across from Evelyn at the kitchen table. The house has settled into its evening quiet, and the space between us feels both intimate and impossibly vast. Ev, I begin, and something in my voice makes her look up from the magazine she's been reading. I need to tell you something. I continue, the words coming slowly, like I'm learning a new language. Something's broken in me. Has been broken for a long time. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. She sets down her magazine carefully, and I can see the exact moment when my words register, when the comfortable assumptions about our life together begin to crack. Her face goes very still, the way it does when she's trying to process information that doesn't fit into her understanding of the world. "What do you mean, broken?" she asks, and her voice is smaller than usual, like she already knows she doesn't want to hear the answer. "I mean, I've been living like a ghost in my own life," I tell her. "Going through the motions because it's what I'm supposed to do, what we're supposed to do, but not because it's what I want. Not because it makes me feel alive." The words hang between us, and I can see her trying to find a way to fix whatever this is, to solve it like one of her fundraising problems that just needs the right approach and enough careful planning. "Is there someone else?" she asks finally, the question barely above a whisper. The silence stretches between us like a chasm. I want to lie, want to give her the comfort of believing this is just a midlife crisis that will pass if she's patient enough. But I can't form the words, can't add another falsehood to the careful construction of deceptions that has become our marriage. My silence is confirmation enough. She nods once, a small, sharp movement, and I watch 20 years of shared history collapse in her eyes. Not with anger, not yet, but with the kind of bewildered hurt that comes when the person you trust most reveals themselves to be a stranger. She stands up from the table without another word, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that seems to echo through the entire house. I listen to her footsteps on the stairs, the careful way she closes the bedroom door, and I know that whatever fragile equilibrium we've maintained has finally shattered completely. I spend the night on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house breathe around me. Every creak and sigh feels amplified in the darkness, and I find myself cataloging all the small sounds that have formed the soundtrack of my domestic life. The refrigerator cycling on and off, the settling of wood and pipes, the distant hum of Clara's television filtering down from upstairs. But underneath it all, I hear something new. Not sound exactly, but the absence of something that's been there so long I'd stopped noticing it. The weight of pretense, the constant low-grade exhaustion of performing a role that never quite fit. For the first time in decades, I'm not trying to be anyone other than exactly who I am in this moment. Frightened, yes. Uncertain about what comes next, absolutely. But awake in a way that feels both terrifying and necessary. By the time dawn light begins to filter through the curtains, I understand that there's no returning from this moment. I can't unfeel what Desmond has awakened in me, can't unknow the difference between existing and living. The choice, when it finally crystallizes in the pale morning light, isn't really a choice at all. It's simply an acknowledgement of what's already true. I sit up on the couch and look around the living room that has framed so much of my adult life. The photographs on the mantel, the furniture Evelyn and I chose together, the careful arrangement of objects that tells the story of a family, a marriage, a life built on compromises and good intentions. It's a beautiful story, but it's not mine anymore. Upstairs, I can hear the sounds of morning beginning. Water running in the bathroom, Clara's alarm clock, the careful choreography of a household waking up to face another day. But I remain on the couch, finally still, finally certain, waiting for enough courage to take the first step toward whatever comes next. The leaving happens slowly, with the careful deliberation of someone dismantling a life that took decades to build. I pack a single suitcase in the guest bedroom, folding clothes into neat stacks with the same precision Evelyn taught me years ago. Shirts, pants, the navy sweater Desmond once said brought out my eyes. Each item feels both essential and insufficient, like I'm trying to compress 20 years of accumulated identity into something that will fit in the overhead compartment of whatever flight I'm not yet ready to board. Evelyn hasn't come downstairs. I can hear her moving around in our bedroom, the careful sounds of someone maintaining normalcy through ritual. The shower running, drawers opening and closing, the hairdryer's familiar hum. She's getting ready for work as if this is just another Thursday. As if the conversation that broke us apart happened in some parallel universe that doesn't affect the fundamental mechanics of daily life. I understand the impulse. For 20 years, We've both been experts at preserving the surface while the foundation shifted beneath us. In the kitchen, I write a note on the pad we've always kept by the phone. Not an explanation, because I don't have words for what I'm doing or why it had to happen this way. Just practicalities. The name of a lawyer, the account numbers she'll need, the assurance that I won't make this harder than it has to be. My handwriting looks strange on the familiar paper, like someone else is moving my pen across the page. I place my wedding band carefully beside her untouched coffee mug, the one with the faded flowers that she's used every morning for as long as I can remember. The ring looks smaller than I expected. This symbol that once felt so weighty, I was constantly aware of its presence. Now it just looks like what it is, a circle of gold, empty at the center. Clara doesn't come downstairs. Part of me wants to wake her, to try to explain what I'm doing and why, to offer some kind of goodbye that might soften the sharp edges of abandonment. But I know that any words I could give her now would be inadequate, colored by my own guilt and confusion. She'll need time to process what I've done, time to decide whether she can forgive me for choosing truth over stability, authenticity over the comfortable lie we've all been living. So I leave quietly, closing the front door with the same care I've used every morning for 2 decades, as if preserving the illusion of normalcy might somehow minimize the damage. The drive to the motel feels different this time. Not stolen or secretive, but inevitable. Like I'm finally traveling in the direction I was always meant to go, instead of constantly fighting against some internal compass that never quite aligned with the path I thought I should take. Desmond is waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. When he sees me pull up with my suitcase in the back seat, something shifts in his expression. Not surprise, exactly, but recognition. As if he's been expecting this moment without quite knowing when it would arrive. We don't talk about what it means. Instead, he follows me into the room that has become our sanctuary, and I watch him take in the weight of what I've done. The suitcase. The way I'm moving through the space like someone who has nowhere else to go. He sits on the edge of the bed and looks at me with those dark eyes that have never learned to hide what they're feeling. You left, he says, not a question, but a simple statement of fact. I left, I confirm, and the words feel both enormous and insufficient. He reaches for me then, pulling me down beside him on the bed that has held so many of our secrets, and when he kisses me, it tastes like relief and sorrow and the kind of gratitude that comes from being seen completely. We make love slowly, with a tenderness that acknowledges what this moment costs, what it promises, what it might mean for whatever version of tomorrow we're brave enough to imagine. Afterward, he falls asleep with his face pressed against my neck, his breathing steady and unguarded in the way that first terrified me and now feels like home. I lie awake in the dim light filtering through the curtains, listening to the sounds of the world continuing outside our small refuge. This time, I don't move away from his warmth. I don't practice distance or try to protect either of us from the feelings we've caught despite all our careful warnings. Instead, I close my eyes and let myself exist exactly where I am, in this moment that feels both like an ending and a beginning. The digital clock blinks its red numbers into the darkness. Cars pass outside, carrying other people toward their own destinations, their own complicated choices. But here in this ordinary room, with Desmond sleeping peacefully beside me, I finally understand what it means to stop running from myself. I think about the ring I left on the kitchen counter, about Evelyn discovering it beside her morning coffee, about Clara waking up in a house that will never feel quite the same. The weight of what I've done sits heavy in my chest, but it's different from the weight I've been carrying for years. This is the heaviness of consequence, of choice, of truth finally spoken aloud. Some truths, once uncovered, cannot be returned to silence. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. And some people, once they've learned what it feels like to be completely themselves, cannot go back to being anyone else. Outside, dawn is still hours away. But lying here in Desmond's arms, I am no longer waiting for morning to tell me who I'm supposed to be.